In this episode of Faith and Life, I'm travelling through County Sligo here in the west of Ireland. I'm on my way to see Father Pat Peyton. Father Pat is the parish priest of Collooney, County Sligo, and a native of County Mayo. And I'm sure that name rings a bell because he is the nephew of the famous priest, Father Patrick Peyton, who coined the phrase, "The family that prays together stays together." Father Pat, we're here in the parish of Collooney in County Sligo on the west coast of Ireland. What type of parish is this?
It's a parish of many nationalities of people. It has changed drastically in the past 10 to 15 years. Really, we're a satellite of the city of Sligo, satellite town, and our school population, national school population, has quadrupled in the past 10 years. I'm here 12 years now.
I'm sure it must be different as well with having so many nationalities, languages and cultures coming into this area.
Yeah, it is difficult because as an Irish people, we tend to think of ourselves solely. But my answer to them, when I hear them criticising these foreigners coming into our country, our Irish people emigrated much, much more so than do Polish or Romanian or Lithuanian or English or whatever. I had three aunts, my father's three elder sisters, Beatrice, Nellie and Mary. They left Ireland at 16. They had little or no education. And they spent the first 2 or 3 years scrubbing floors until they saw that education was their only hope, so they started going to night school. And each of them in their turn got quite good jobs. So I think as a nation we can be very forgetful of our own people. I don't think there's any house in Ireland, north, south, east or west, that hasn't some people who had to immigrate to America, to England, to Australia, New Zealand, wherever it may be.
You also worked for 27 years in, is it Secretariat, is that right?
Yeah, primary school secretariat. Basically, my role there was to help priests and boards of management, to help them to get what was needed for their schools, to get advice for principal teachers who was having difficulty with parents or with teachers or maybe with the priest himself. All that type of management and the day-to-day running of a school, to see that it was being done properly and that boards of management are put in place every 5 years and so on.
You grew up in Mass, just outside Ballina, County Mayo. What are your memories from back then?
Small rural community, farming background, and
Your father was a farmer?
farmer, yeah.
Yeah.
And he was known as a handyman at the time. He built sheds for people, extensions to houses and everything like that. My mother looked after the cows and pigs and whatever else was going on.
It must have been very hard work for the two of them.
It was. Because there was little or no money. There was no social welfare in those days or anything else like that. And most of the men in the area went to England and Scotland.
Was the faith a big part of your family?
Very much so. Every night the rosary was said, even when my mother was on her own with the two of us. When she was saying it, there'd be little or no trimmings. When my father was saying it would be everybody was prayed for all over the parish and the world. My brother and myself would kneel down with them and we'd arrange for the dog to be between the two of us, Bran as he was called, and one or other would pinch him. And then my father would give us a look and that was enough. We knew we had to concentrate then on the prayers again. So, yeah, Mass was absolutely important. We wouldn't miss Mass for love or money.
Knock is not too far from Mass. Did you visit it often?
We definitely visited once a year, usually around the 15th of August or a Sunday either side of that, depending on what was on the farm and that type of thing. It was a different place then, much smaller village, small galvanised sheds as souvenir shops and so on.
Yeah.
And as a child, if you're kind of good for the day, you might come home with a bar of rock from Knock. That was a treat for being good.
Father Pat, we're in your family home here in Arimas. This photograph of the old house,
Yeah.
clearly that wasn't in this exact spot.
It's just where the present lawn is for this house would be more or less the basis of it. And then the shed for the cattle over at the side of it. And this will be the back of this house here, this whole area. Whitewashed walls, whitewashed gables.
What were the living conditions back then?
They were very basic. There would have been probably 2 rooms and a kitchen.
Would you have grown all of your own food?
Absolutely, absolutely. With potatoes, cabbage, carrots, parsnips, peas, sprouts, and then cauliflower came later.
What about meat?
Meat would basically be bacon and chicken.
Right.
You had a treat on a Sunday with a chicken.
Father Pat, he visits very often. We bring him in most Sundays for the dinner. He's in for all celebrations, birthdays, anniversaries, everything. Because we live in the homestead, and he lives in a parochial house out in Clooney. So this is his home.
This house here was, about a 1 hour's journey from Ballina?
Yeah, 45-50 minutes, yeah.
On horse and cart, I presume?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And later then on bicycles.
Also growing up here was your father.
That's right.
And Father Tom and Father Patrick Peyton himself. How did the house actually get passed down then to your father?
Well, the tradition in the west of Ireland would be to go with the oldest son. My father was the oldest son, with 3 girls older than him. Beatrice, Nellie and Mary were older, and they had gone to America. So my father, and he took over the land at 14 years of age.
Father Pat, when he left here, he probably never even had been outside Ballina.
No, he wouldn't have been. Or Tom either.
And they took that courageous decision, I'm sure, get on a horse and cart to Ballina, and then how would they have got
Train to Dublin.
train to Dublin?
And then from Dublin down to Cove in County Cork. And the ocean liner all the way to New York.
And back then, there wouldn't have been much of anything for people.
No, there wasn't. And no prospects.
Did you, as a community, share food, and did you
Absolutely.
share work and help each other out?
Everything, yeah. If you had your work done, be it in the bog or whatever it was, you went out and helped a neighbour. If it was in the hayfield and you had your cocks made up in the evening and tied with a rope, you went off to help a neighbour.
You have some photographs here.
That's right.
Is that you as a little boy?
It is. It would have been probably the day of my first communion, because that to me looks very much like the Bishop's house in Killala. So I made my first communion there because my uncle, Father Pat, was having the rally the next day.
So this was your mother here?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, Father Patrick Peyton here.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And I think that was Dean Gilvary.
Okay.
And the other man, I'm not sure who he was.
Lovely. And also, this photograph.
That would be 1954,
Right.
when Father Pat was here doing the rallies.
And this is your mother and
Mother,
father
yeah.
with Father Patrick, and
That's me.
yourself and your
that's
brother
Tom.
Tom.
Yeah.
Here you are in this photograph,
Yeah, I was
a bit older
a
and
good bit older.
clearly working on the farm.
Yeah, that's right, bringing in the hay. I probably was 15, 16 maybe at the time. Tom was 4 years younger than me, so that was one of the chores.
And what was that like to be doing that job?
Hay was lovely.
Right?
Enjoyed doing the hay and that. You got the joy and the thrill of being able to use the horse. That was a great achievement, like
Yes.
to be able to manage the horse and cart at the age of 12, 13, 14, 15.
And then
Yeah.
here we are.
Yeah.
It's a lovely photograph, and you're giving your 2 uncles, Father Pat and Father Tom, a blessing. It looks
That's
like.
right, yeah, the day of my ordination. the 24th of June 1972 in Mass. Father Pat had to rush away. He was flying out of Shannon Airport at 7 o'clock that evening.
Is that right?
Yeah.
We're here in the Father Patrick Peyton Memorial Centre in Mass. When he did get home, did you get to see him much?
I did. He would, 1954, when he was doing the Rosary rallies in the Western Province, he stayed at home for about three weeks. He would get his secretary or the chauffeur, someone to ring and say that he'd be in Carricastle, the home place, at say 8 o'clock in the evening. And in the summertime, all he'd want was bacon and cabbage. That was his evening meal. He was
something
happy with
very
that.
simple.
Yeah, very. Yeah.
And what type of man was he?
Extremely determined. He had a vision that he was a servant of Mary. And he lived that vision. The two phrases he had that have become known worldwide are a family that pray together, stay together, and the world at prayer is a world at peace.
Here's an early photograph. Who all is in this photograph?
My father, Mick, Tom, later become Father Tom, John was the youngest of the family, and Pat, and then the three sisters, Nellie, Beatrice, and Mary.
This photograph here now has Father Pat in it, and that was dated 1941. So what was happening at that time?
They became deacons where they made the commitment to celibacy, and usually a year before ordination. That's Father Tom and Father Pat here, and the other lads were classmates of theirs. This is a photograph of Pat and Tom in 1929 when they entered the seminary in the States.
And when the two of them left Mass, they both went to America, and what happened?
The recession was on in America at the time, and the first thing was that they couldn't get any work. So Nellie, their sister, the younger of the three, the girls went out first, what happened to be a receptionist, housekeeper in the local parish. And she told the parish priest there, Father Woods, I think was his name, that she had two brothers coming out from Ireland and be looking for work. Could he recommend something? And he said that the janitor, as he was called there, that he gave them a job doing that. And then Pat continued his idea of being a priest. Tom, 6 months later, also decided.
This photograph here of Father Patrick, that was in 1938, I see, in the Notre Dame Infirmary.
Yeah.
Now, that, from what I have read, was a defining moment in his life.
It was, yeah.
And what was he struggling with at that moment?
TB. Doctors had no hope for him at all. And one of the doctors said to him, Pat, he said, there's nothing more we can do for you. You better turn to prayer. And that was the moment that he decided he would dedicate his life to Mary, the Mother of Jesus, and the Rosary as a form of prayer. He recovered.
He certainly did go on to devote his life to Mary and the Rosary, of course, which we all know him by. In this photograph here, I see him with Bing Crosby.
That's right.
And then also in 1949, the Triumphant Hour, he's leading a cast in prayer.
That's right, that's right. He was many, many years ahead of his time of using the media to communicate the message of the Rosary.
Father Pat, I have a surprise. With me today is a family heirloom, and this here is something that was passed down by my mother, and she received it from her parents.
Yeah.
And that is a letter from actually your uncle, Father Patrick Peyton.
That's right, yes.
And also a photograph that they had taken of him at St Patrick's grave.
That's right. Downpatrick, yeah.
And one of the things that they had done was actually attended this Downpatrick Rosary rally.
Yeah.
So, in this letter, it's written from Carrickcastle, Ballina,
That's right.
on the 23rd of September 1954. He would not have just had hundreds or thousands, it was millions of people that actually
absolutely,
came out to see him.
Yeah, and he had only the English language. That's the only language he had.
Would a priest today be able to get this amount of people to come out?
I honestly don't think so. The world has changed drastically. And he was a very charismatic person. He attracted people.
And what was that like attending one of those rallies?
I always found it emotional. I suppose he was an uncle and yeah.
I never dreamed in those days that God in his goodness was planning this wonderful thing for me, that I'd never have a day's rest in my life in order to plan and execute and follow through the chain reaction of this truly enormous challenge as it enveloped the earth.
At what point did your faith become your own and not something that you did because your parents were doing it?
Probably in secondary school, as I went through the 5 years there, talking to some of the priests from time to time, I just began to develop my own understanding of God and what it meant in my life. The beauty of God's creation, I think, was the one thing that always drew me to God. Even in secondary school, you'd see after Easter you go back and the daffodils were out and then the bluebells came out, the trees began to bloom, and the colour of God's creation and the beauty of it.
Did you always know that you were going to maybe go on to become a priest, or was that something that came later?
Early, when I went to secondary school, first I would have thought of being a priest because there were about 18, 19 priests teaching in the college and one layperson. And yeah, that dream of being a priest, and it was just a dream. But then for a year or two, kind of around the 15, 16, maybe into the 17-year bracket, just began to rebel, questioning what's it all about? Is there a heaven? Is there a hell? Are you rewarded for doing good and punished maybe for evil or whatever, doing wrong? And then I had to sort that out in my own head. And I suppose it was at that stage then, 17, 18-year-old, before I did the Leaving Cert, that I said, well, this is a possibility for me. I'll give it a try.
And what or who influenced you at that time to make that decision?
I suppose my two uncles, and since Father Pat, who was known as the Rosary Priest, would have some effect in my thinking, in the sense that he came home in 1954 when I was 6 years of age, when the Rosary rallies were going on. And he stayed at home for about 3 weeks that time. And it was a tough 3 weeks because he got up at about 6 in the morning and said Mass on the kitchen table. And the people flocked in from far and near. So my father and mother had to be up at about 4 to get everything ready. My father had to go at the end of the road to direct traffic. Some of the ladies waited for the cup of tea to have a chat with my uncle and that. So they didn't get to work until about 10, 11 o'clock in the day. Then more relations and cousins and close neighbours would come in at 9, 10 o'clock at night and say the rosary with us. And they'd stay for another cup of tea, so they wouldn't get to bed in 1 or 2. So I think my parents nearly lost all faith during that 3 weeks, And my other uncle, Father Thomas, he was also a Holy Cross priest, but was in pastoral ministry in New Orleans. He came home for about 6, 7 weeks every 4 years. He also had permission to say Mass in the house, and some of the neighbours would come in, and he trained me how to serve Mass. Never pushed me in any way. Neither of them ever pushed me.
Right.
Even my father, when I told them at home that I was thinking of becoming a priest, and all he said to me was, good luck, we're behind you. if you're not happy in it, don't stay.
Did the Father Tom and Father Patrick ever give you any advice?
Father Pat did, in the sense that I spent the first year in All Hallows when I started to study for the priesthood, and I fell out with the dean there, who insisted on calling everybody Mister.
Mm-hmm.
It appeared that we had no Christian name, and he called me Mister one morning. And I said, "Excuse me, Father," I said, "my father paid £1 to put Christian names on me, Patrick Joseph, and I'd like to be called that."
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first clash that we had,
Right.
of many. And the night before the summer holidays, he knocked on my room door. I was packing, and he put his head around the door and he said, "Mr. Peyton, we consider you have no vocation, try something else." So I came home disillusioned, because I had a happy year.
Mm-hmm.
I had done well in my studies, and things were looking good. I was looking forward to going to America as a priest, because all of the lads in my class would have been going to America, some to Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody would have stayed in Ireland, because All Hallows in Dublin at the time was training men for the English-speaking mission of the world. When I came home, I told my parents, and they said, "Well, what are you going to do?" So I decided I'd do agricultural science in University College Galway. And then in September, my brother was going back to St. Athie's College, and I went back with him. Met one of the priests who taught me Irish, Father McGiblin, got me good to him. And he asked me what I was doing, so I told him that I'd been in All Hallows and the story and everything else like that. And he simply said to me, he said, "Did you ever think of our diocese?" And I said, "Not really."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Would you think of it?" And I said, "No, I've my mind made up now. I'm going to go to Galway and try that route." And that was on a Monday evening, and on Wednesday morning I had a letter from our late bishop at that time, Bishop James Fergus, inviting me to come to see him with a view to going for the diocese. He gave me an option of going to Maynooth, but I'd have to do the 7 years because of the degree,
Mm-hmm.
or to go to Rome. And I just asked him about Rome, what did that mean? So he said it'd be Italian and Latin. I had no Italian, I didn't particularly like Latin. But at 19 years of age, the thoughts of getting away from home and going to Rome and seeing a bit of the world
Of course.
was an attraction itself.
What were those years like in Rome?
Great.
Good.
Best 5 years of my life. Did a Bachelor of Theology degree and a Bachelor of Philosophy degree, and enjoyed Rome. It was a different world.
You've brought some photographs here with you today.
Yeah.
And just looking at this one, I think this here is your ordination.
That's right.
Yeah, and this is your mother.
24th of June 1972. My father and mother. I was ordained in the parish church in Mass, where I was baptised.
And then also in this booklet here, we see Lourdes. There
That's
you
right.
are. And is that a place that you visited much?
Yes, I led the diocesan pilgrimage for, I think, about 12 years, back in the 70s and 80s.
In this photograph, Father, we see St. Pope John Paul, and clearly, is that yourself there in it?
That's right, just behind the Pope there. It was in his private oratory. There were, I think, 30 priests from all over the world.
Uh-huh.
The reason I was there was our class were 25 years ordained during the year, and that Mass was on the feast of St. Peter and Paul, the 29th of June.
And did you get speaking to him?
We did indeed. When the Mass was over, we were all brought out into a big room,
Mm-hmm.
and were put into a horseshoe shape with the older priests, 60, 55, 50, 40 and so on, in that order around. So the Pope was brought around by one of his secretaries, and he just looked down along the line, and he paused for a moment, and then he had a smile on his face, and he said, "Baby priests." We were 25 years ordained, thinking we were getting old, and now we're told by the leader of the church that we're only babies. That's the story behind that picture.
He's a very strong personality. He's a great parish priest. He has great time for his parishioners. He'd do anything for anybody that came night or day. He'd always give them a helping hand.
What would you say to a young man or woman who is at a crossroads in their life, just like you were back then when you only had finished that 1 year?
I would say take time out from what you're at the moment and just take a quiet place, be it a church, be it your own home, just to sit with God and listen and let God do the talking, and then make a decision.